Join event. How many people have we got online? 18. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this year's Production Nursery Industry Benchmarking Tool webinar. We have 18 people online. We're waiting for a few more people to come online, so we might just pause for a minute before we start. Good afternoon and welcome, and we'll talk to you in a minute. Oops. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We have 20 people online. There'll be a few more coming, but in the interest of time, given we've only got half an hour, I think we should start. Welcome to what is the 7th time that this benchmarking tool has been developed for Australia's production nursery. My name's JP Van Mort from ASOL Allen. I'm joined by my colleague, Marshall Roberts, who develops the tool. And we're welcome to give you the update for this project that's funded by Hort Innovation, and we do it in partnership with the Green Life Industry Association and Down to Earth Research. Our agenda today is to give you an update on the latest industry benchmarks and then how the industry is tracking over time. And I'm going to pass over to my colleague Marshall, who's going to give you an update on the latest, for those of you who are new to the tool, how it works, for those of you who've been here before, to give you an idea on the latest updates and how we've addressed the feedback we've received from you. We'll go through a couple of practical applications, and our aim is to finish in plenty of time for you to ask questions. Given the nature of the webinar, if you have a question, please type it into the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll answer those questions. And don't worry, any question is a good question. And if we run out of time, we'll keep going to answer your question, and we'll make sure that we address them afterwards so everybody knows that the questions have been asked. And then we've got a little bit of information about what's going to happen in the last year of the project and where you can access some of the resources that we refer to today. So without any further ado, I think we get into it. This is a repeat of what you've seen in the past, but why do we benchmark? Well, we do it for the snapshots. It allows you to compare your business against others and see how you're going against your peers. You can examine and track quite a lot of detail around your products and the market segments in which you operate. Use it as a basis to see whether you're improving year on year. There's quite a lot of financial data in the tool. You can use it to focus on growth. And there's also, you can use it as a business planning tool through mechanisms such as SWOT. And we've actually got a SWOT that was done for the industry last year to share at the end of the presentation. So lots of applications on what is now starting to become quite a mature data set. But let's go to the state of the industry. So what we saw last year in terms of overall, the results show that there still is about 1,600 nurseries involved in production side of the industry, down slightly. It's a bit cyclical. It's a bit in the natural variation that you'd expect. Good solid numbers, even though it's down, which we think is partly just structural and cyclical rather than fundamental to the industry. That overall, 71% of your turnover, more than $72 million per year, which is up slightly, actually. So there's been a slight increase in size of business this year. There's about 19,000 full-time employees, which is down a bit due to cyclical issues. Profitability is down a bit due to market conditions. The same with the expectation of future profit is down a bit, but still overall at plus 70 to 75%, very strong. It's a very labour-intensive industry, so a lot of the money is going to wages, and there is a decline, though, in infrastructure and technology spends, which again we think is largely due to cyclical issues. So the industry, has come off a peak, but still performing very strongly, and the prospects for the future are excellent. When we look at the these are just some of the average numbers, and Marshall will give us a little bit more detail. So the average business turns over at $1.6 million. Of that, about $750,000 goes to salary and wages. Operating costs, including wages, are there. So there's a gross profit of about $300,000 on the EBITDA. There's about 9.6 FTEs per business, which equates to about 12.7 employees. And the average area is about 3.6 hectares when you include indoor and outdoor. To give you some relativity, though, out of those, the average business is 19.8% of production ends up going to the big box sector, which is far more concentrated in the large one, where 42% sell to big box versus small ones, only 6%. The wages to sales ratio in this type of industry is pretty much in line with the norm, which is quite high because it's a labour-intensive industry, about 41%. But again, you see it's higher in small ones and lower in large ones. Operating costs are 80% of total sales or total revenue. And what you see here is that, again, a slight inverse relationship here, really. The smaller businesses have a lower proportion of operating costs, while the larger ones have a greater proportion, which is about, margin-driven type of structures that you'd expect to see. We also have here about $154,000 per year in sales per full-time equivalent. And again, more sales are generated from large businesses, as you'd expect. And the turnover per hectare is actually, the average is not really the story here, because you can see that the large businesses are turning over about 3 times per hectare. So their per unit area productivity is much higher, which, given the amount of attention that's paid to that and the scale they operate, is not unsurprising. All of these things are in the latest report, which is available, and also drives into the tool. But look, the key part of this project has always been not to talk about the averages and the generalities, but to present this information to you in a way that you can use inside of your business. And I'm now going to pass over to Marshall. I jumped ahead of myself. There is a new stat this year, and this is quite important, and we're delighted to report it. So obviously, with the economic conditions tightening a bit, the price is actually a really important question. And so we looked at that this year, and we found that 2/3 of businesses surveyed actually had increased their prices, and it was an average across the sector of about 8%. So quite a substantial price increase. When you look at the chart on the left, you see that it's 66% nationally, but the price increases, more price increases have been undertaken by larger businesses, and 80% in the largest category. When you look at then the unit price increase, you see that it's really the businesses less than $500,000 category that have actually increased prices the most, far more than the larger businesses, which says that really a lot of these businesses have had no choice but to increase price to stay viable. This is all part of the natural market corrections. Now I'll go back to where I jumped ahead of myself, and I'll pass over to Marshall, who's now going to walk you through the tool. So Marshall, over to you. And remember, please put your comments and your questions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on them and make sure we answer them.
Thank you, JP. Thanks for the introduction and some insights into how the industry is tracking. Shifting towards the benchmarking tool now. You can see on the left-hand side, this is the benchmarking tool that you will see when you first open the file. It's an Excel-based tool. It's designed to be very user-friendly. And as you can see by the contents, it's substantial across 13 different categories, depending on what you want to look at. In this year's tool, we have a new input sheet, which allows you to input data at one location and then observe your results throughout the rest of the tool. The updated summary tab presents your benchmarks and your data against your peers or comparable sized businesses. We also present, as JP mentioned, some new information on pricing benchmarks and how businesses have changed their prices over the last 2 years. Similar to previous versions, data is presented by business size, ranging from less than 500,000 to a larger business over 4 million. And values are also presented in terms of lower, middle, and upper values, depending on how you wish to compare yourself We'll shift towards the Inputs tab now. So this is the input sheet that you can navigate to within the tool. And noting the numbering on the left-hand side, just to direct your attention to a few areas throughout the next few slides. At item 1, we're referencing the dark purple cells. So these are input cells where you can enter your business data up to the previous 7 years. If you wish, you can just enter your data for the 2023-24 year. And all this asks is 13 data points. And using these data points, the tool will generate around 20 benchmarks or 20 data points, which you can compare your business to the industry. This is the updated summary results tab within the benchmarking tool. And again, referencing to item number 1, you can see that column is My Business, and that's your data that flows through from the Inputs tab. At item number 2, in terms of how you compare, this column will present how you compare in terms of above or below the industry benchmark, and we'll present this in terms of a percentage difference, either positive or negative. At item number 3, you can see here we're comparing ourselves to small businesses with a turnover of less than 500,000. So you can observe the industry benchmarks here. Finally, at the top of the screen within the benchmarking tool, you'll be able to change who you compare yourself to, whether it be a small business or a large commercial business. You can also change the data points that you're compared to in terms of a low, middle, and high range, but we recommend you use the median, as this will present the typical business and will remove outliers from the benchmarks.
Marshall, can I just pause here? So we have a question from Brisbane Valley Wholesale Nurseries here, saying, should they enter the values with or without GST?
That's a good question. I would include GST.
Yeah, it should be with GST.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Here we can see some more examples of the charts that you'll see within the tool. On the left-hand side, you can see your business is placed within a top, middle, and bottom range. And as this shows, we are positioned between the bottom and middle values. So this metric shows how you've changed your price over the last 2 years, and it shows where you're positioned. On the right-hand side, we can see a time series of full-time equivalent employees. And as an example, for this business, they employ around 10 full-time employees, and we can see that's positioned towards the lower end. So typically businesses of our size that we're comparing ourselves to would hire between 15 and 20 full-time equivalents. So these are some examples of charts that you will see throughout the benchmarking tool. Moving on to a few applications that might help you better understand how you may use the tool in your business. We've developed 2 short case studies that may provide more information about the tool. Our first case study, we're going to compare a medium-sized nursery to a larger commercial nursery who may wish to identify where there are areas of improvement in terms of productivity and efficiency. In terms of a case study 2, we're going to look at a high sales but high cost business. So the scenario is a nursery with strong revenue struggles with profitability due to high labour and operating expenses. So I'll just run you through these 2 case studies now. So without getting caught up in too much detail on the page, we can see that we have a value of our turnover is 1.27 million. And we're going to be comparing ourselves to larger businesses in that 2 to 4 million range, as indicated up the top of the screen. Referring to item number 1, we can see that our overall headline benchmarks are lower than the benchmarks, which is okay because we're comparing ourselves to larger businesses. At item number 2, we can see that our production area of 8.9 hectares is above the industry benchmark by 183%. So that's the first thing that would stand out to me in terms of being different to the benchmark. At item number 3, we can see our investment in technology and infrastructure of $30,000 is well below the industry benchmark. but this may depend on the timing of your investment, and perhaps you had a higher level investment last year. So we'll leave this up to interpretation. At item number 4, towards the bottom of the screen, we present some operating ratios. Here we can see there's a relatively high wage to sales ratio of 55%, which is around 17% above the industry benchmark for these larger businesses. We can also see our operating cost to sale ratio of 93% is also relatively high by about 7 percentage points. And finally, item number 5, we can see our turnover per full-time employee is quite low, and this relates back to our higher than expected production area. Again, we'll leave this up to your interpretation. We can also see the turnover per hectare of 142,000 is well below the industry benchmark, which also would likely relate to the 8.9 hectares of outdoor production area. So some things to think about for this case study. We may look at optimising our space utilisation and plant density. Our turnover per hectare appears to be quite low. We may review our wage and non-wage expenditure, especially our wage to sales ratio appears to be a little bit high in comparison to our sales. Finally, we may review our market reach and sales channels. As we can see below item 3, we sell one product type, so we may look to diversify offering to increase sales. Graphically for this business, so you'll see charts like this in the tool. We can see that our wage to sales ratio is above the industry benchmark, with most businesses having a ratio here of around 30 to 45%. We're slightly above in that dark purple section. Our investment in technology, we can see we didn't invest in technology last year, where most businesses spent up to 50,000, and in some cases, some businesses spent up to 200,000, which may deliver productivity gains. On the right-hand side, we can see we sold 100% into the perennials, trees and shrubs product type, where other businesses have realised sales through propagation, fruit, nut and trees, indoor plants, and also other categories. Moving on to the second case study. So this is our high sales but high cost business. In this case, we can see we're comparing ourselves to similar sized businesses with a turnover of $2 million to $4 million, with our value of sales at 2.9 million. We can see that our operational costs of 2.7 million immediately look quite high, at 23% above the industry benchmark. Our employment at item number 2 on the screen, we can see we've got 17 people employed, or 10 full-time equivalent employees, which is below the industry benchmark by about 41%. At item number 3, we can see our total production area of 3.6 hectares, which is broadly in line with industry benchmarks and businesses that are of similar size to us. At item 4, we can see across our key performance ratios of wages to sales and operating expense to sales that we're between 5 to 7 percentage points above the industry benchmark, which says that we may review our wage and non-wage expenditure, and if there's anything we can do in this space. Our second point, we may look to optimise our labour efficiency. So this is an interesting one where we hire less people than the industry benchmark. However, our wage to sale ratio is above the industry benchmark. Interestingly, we can see at item number 5 below that our average FTE salary is quite high, which may warrant us to look at our casual versus full-time staff as well. And finally, we may look at investigating technology that may enhance productivity. We can see we spent $20,000, which is slightly below the industry benchmark, but there may be some opportunities in this space. So moving forward for this business, we can see on the left-hand side how drastically our operating cost to sales have increased. Notably, the median reflected there is our peers, and we can see that they've also experienced significant increases in operational costs, with the median approaching 90% compared to our 94%, and well up on 2019-20 levels. On the right-hand side, we can see where we're positioned in terms of full-time employees, so slightly below the industry benchmark. And towards the bottom right, we can see trends in our wage to sales ratio, which has moved in a positive direction, declining to around 40% and more in line with industry benchmarks, which really tells me that our non-wage expenditure has increased significantly. So that might be something to review for this business. So JP, I hope that's given some good insights into the potential of the tool and how it may be used. But just to conclude, I think businesses should really look to interpret their results. The benchmarking tool won't say whether one thing's negative or positive, given the unique circumstances of each different production nursery. So it'll give you the benchmarks, but we'll leave it to you to interpret.
Thank you very much, Marshall. So that's where we're up in terms of the presentation, and now the floor is open to you to ask any questions. So we've had one question from Brisbane Valley Wholesale Nursery around the GST, and the answer is yes. When you enter the numbers, please include GST. Any other questions, please type away into the chat line. We'll just take a pause and allow you to gather your thoughts and enter some questions. I can't see any typing. Surely there must be a question out there. There is no such thing as a wrong question. Yes. How do we get access to the benchmarking tool? The answer is from the Greenlife Industry Association website, and in the next slides we'll give you the links to that, and also the PDF from this workshop will be available to those who attended, and it'll be circulated around to you, so you don't have to write it down.
And just to repeat, the benchmarking tool is an Excel file, so you can download that straight onto your desktop and use it as you wish.
And email Celeste Cook at Greenlife Industries. That's in the chat. That's the practical answer. If you don't want to go through the links, just go direct to source, and Celeste will happily send you out one. And we know that she just also, those of you who kindly completed the survey last year, you've been emailed the tool directly on Monday morning, is my understanding.
Yep.
By Dan from Down to Earth. Yes, and the answer is who to contact. Who to contact is the gentleman to my right. Marshall is always available. He happily answers. Every year he he'll pick up the phone, or he'll answer your email and walk you through any complications or questions you have around the tool. Yep. Yes, another question has just come through saying, the figures are available in the report. So yes, every year we produce this Excel workbook, which is emailed out, but there's also a report which then summarises all the industry statistics and sort of gives you some data about the methods used. And so it's got some technical bits, but also just like a written summary with the key charts inside of that. And that report is also publicly available, and we'll be handing out a link on that. Or again, just email Celeste and she will email you a copy of that report.
Yep. And I will just note that the benchmarking tool does contain some industry trends with a big focus on the, I guess, trends in benchmarks, whereas I guess the report is tracking the actual actual figures. And so there's benefits of both resources.
Mm. And there's actually, because the project's been running for a while, there's quite a number of resources, which there's an environmental scan, and then we gave a presentation at the industry conference a couple of weeks ago where we talked about some of the interpretation and what we think some of the trends are meaning. And so there's a lot of really good business intelligence information that beyond the benchmarking tool that summarises a lot of these things. And Celeste says, yes, the tool is, while the report is available to everybody, the tool is a levy payer only tool. So you have to be a levy payer to receive a copy of the tool. Yeah. And they've put in Marshall Roberts' email address as well, so you can't escape Marshall.
Excellent.
All right. If there aren't any more details, I might just do a couple of closing slides. And I think we've also got slides to give you a couple of excerpts that came out from the presentation I gave in Brisbane as well. So let's quickly go through those. So this is where you go to, yes, but email Celeste, and her address is in the contact list, and she'll send you a tool if you're eligible. But look, ultimately, there are, I said, here's a list of these other products. We have, there's been what's called an economic contribution study, which is sort of like saying, looking at saying, well, this is what it does for the economy at a statewide level and a national level, the number of jobs it creates, the overall contribution to economic activity, quite an important policy document. There's also a repetition of an environmental or PESTLE scan, which stands for political, economic, social, technological, legislative, and environmental dimensions of what's going on in the industry. That was updated last year. There is the industry stats report, and there's the tool. There are links to all of these down the bottom that are there. So we've taken this data over the years and developed a number of sort of industry profiling and analytics products on top of the tool itself, which always the intent, collect once for many purposes. And obviously there's the educational events like the webinars, and also please contact Marshall at any time. This is the second last collection under this phase of the project. So in spring next year, we'll be doing taking on board some feedback and sitting down, and Dan will go to down to earth as such with his team, and they'll be ringing up you on a randomised basis to collect the data for the final benchmarking tool report, which will be come out in about March 2026, the next autumn. We're looking at some Power BI and some more advanced reporting things to complement the Excel thing. We'll always report in Excel, so that's some exciting developments for the final year of the project. But in the 1 minute I got left, I just want to say, look, in the environmental scan, there is a strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis of it. In the interest of time, I won't go through it. There's a lot of really good things in the environmental scan about how to structure and how to think about building business cases for yourself, and a policy dimension. It's a great industry. It's quite diverse. The demand is strong. We understand where the weaknesses of the industry are, and you can work individually and collectively on doing that. There are opportunities both in working with people and around the whole sustainability dimensions, and we all ride through economic downturns and regulatory dimensions. The biggest thing is that the industry is strong, but we've come off this spike like a lot of parts of the economy have done, and so that's just part of a natural cycle as such. Certainly doing some sound testing with people who came to the conference. While things are tougher, there's no doubt for people, the prospects for the industry overall remain strong, but improvement is necessary. And this is a line that just demonstrates that once you take on board the corrections, that the industry is still expected to grow into the future. But times are tough for many people, and to maintain that, the industry needs to continue to grow above 1.5% a year, and probably more like about 5 or 6 once you take on board inflationary pressures. So the need to focus on that is very important for success in the future. And finally, here are the contact details of Marshall and myself. And I'd just like to take the opportunity for that to thank you for attending, and that, as always, we really enjoy working with you, and we enjoy collaborating in the support of our partners in delivering this project, and particularly the funding from Hort Innovation, the leadership that Green Life Industry Australia has taken in achieving this, and particularly Down to Earth Research, who have the hardest job in being in contact with you all every year to get the data to generate these reports from. So thank you, good afternoon, and see you soon.